This is just the beginning.
Welcome to this Axios News Shapers, America's Road Ahead. I'm Mike Allen, a co-founder of Axios. Welcome to my home in Arlington, Virginia. We'll be joined by Margaret Taleff, who's our White House and politics editor. Thank you to the Bank of America for making these conversations possible. And thank you for joining us on the many platforms of Axios events. We'd love for you to follow along on Twitter at Axios, #Axios events. I caught up earlier with our first guest, Steve Cortes, a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. Steve was a trader on Wall Street. He was doing business commentary on Fox when, what do you know, Donald Trump saw him, liked him, eventually brought him into the operation. And so now he's coming to us from Trump campaign headquarters, which by coincidence is just a few blocks away from here in Arlington, Virginia. Steve Cortes, welcome to Axios.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
So, Steve, there's a lot of conversation among Democrats about how Joe Biden shouldn't get too complacent. I guess for your team, it's kind of the opposite, right? Like if you look at national polls, swing state polls, money, you're down. How do you keep the team up?
No, you're right. We have the inverse challenge because I think corporate media is really trying very hard to push a narrative that we have no chance in this election. So we need to convince our people that they should stay motivated, stay engaged, and that we can and in fact will win on November 3rd. And so, you know, look, it's most important, I think, for us to highlight to our supporters, to everybody, that battleground state polls are what matter most. And when you look at battleground state polls, the public polling, yes, it does show us down, but down by really small margins, certainly margins that we can capture in the next few weeks. You know, in politics, things can change by the hour, by the day. So while the clock is ticking, we also have a lot of time to make sure that all those battleground states are indeed in play. And I think Team Biden knows that as well. I mean, I think that, you know, in reality, they don't believe that they are up double digits nationally. We certainly don't believe that. And again, it's not a national election. It's a state by state election. And we are not remotely complacent. We know that we have to hustle and grind. We have to earn the vote of every single American, especially in those battleground states. But we also have a confidence. We think the momentum is going our way, primarily because the economic momentum is so intense right now in this country. There's just an economic renaissance that's unfolding around this country. Again, corporate media doesn't want much to talk about it, but the numbers really tell the story. And I think the people know it just in their personal lives.
Now, Steve, as you know, whether you're in a financial trade or a sports team or in politics, when you're down, you just need something to grab onto, something to work with, something to start a drive. And Twitter has given your campaign that gift.
Right. No, it sure has. You know, it's incredibly unfortunate what big tech is doing to free speech generally in this country. This isn't new, but what is new is that they're actually suspending the accounts of our campaign. I mean, the president of the United States, his official campaign social media accounts have been suspended by Twitter. That's outrageous. I mean, by that ludicrous standard, Watergate, the Woodward and Bernstein stories would have never been published. Twitter would have suppressed them. The Pentagon Papers couldn't have been published. I mean, we could go on and on. You know, look, good journalists often use unusual means, obviously, to get their information. If this information is valid, and again, there's been no indication from the Biden side that it is not valid and accurate. If this information is accurate, it is extremely damning, not just of Hunter, but also of Joe Biden. Yeah. And it's pretty reprehensible of social media then
to stop you on the Joe Biden point. So three things. One, the Biden campaign has denied that this formal meeting took place. Second, you can read into it what you want. There's no evidence there directly about Joe Biden. This is about his son, Hunter Biden. And third, what Twitter would say, they are holding this back under their hacked materials policy. They're questioning the provenance of this material, the origin of it, whether it's authentic, whether it could have come from a foreign actor.
Sure. Well, but again, it would be very easy for Team Biden to just say, these aren't authentic. These are faked emails. No one has said that. And I think this is also very crucial. I mean, we need to be careful here because the Biden campaign is trying to be very crafty.
Steve, when you woke up to the news that your candidate, the president of the United States, had tested positive for COVID, were you hoping that that would be a little bit of a reset moment, that maybe the president would then come out and say, oh, I get it now. Yes, we should wear masks. Yes, we should social distance. Yes, we should be more careful. He's done the opposite. Now you are back to your packed rallies again. Is that a problem for the campaign?
Look, I don't think the rallies are a problem, and there's certainly no evidence that there's been any medical fallout from our rallies. We do them outside. We take temperature checks. That's required of everybody. We request that everyone wear masks, and we provide masks. A lot of people don't choose to wear them. That is we do believe in individual choice. And I think the president's response, in my view, has been exactly correct. And what I mean by that is he's saying, look, we have to take this virus seriously. He knows better than anyone because he himself got infected and did briefly, get reasonably sick. Thankfully, he's better. But we also can't live in fear of the virus or in fear of each other. And we can take reasonable precautions while getting back toward normalcy in our country. And that's the message that he's trying to give the country, that his own personal health recovery can be symbolic and we hope inspiring for a national recovery, both from the virus and economically speaking.
Now, Steve, you talk about economics, and I mentioned that you came off of Wall Street. And you do some chalk talks there, a modern version of a chalk talk, Maganomics. Tell us about your chalk talks.
I sure do. So, yes, I have a show for Team Trump Online called Maganomics. I do that every week. We highlight an entrepreneur, a small business owner that people probably don't know about and tell their stories. So we hope to inspire small business and entrepreneurs all over the country. And then we also have an expert to talk the macro scene on the economy. And that is supplemented by chalk talks that I do just about every day. I technically use a whiteboard. A lot of people give me heat for that I'm not using chalk. But I call it a chalk talk because I want to evoke the memories a lot of people have of their coach in a locker room, perhaps, do it at chalk talk. And I do them on the economy because I think there's a story that isn't being told of the incredible V-shaped recovery in this country. The president calls it a super V, and the data actually backs that. We know we still have work to do. There are still too many Americans who are unemployed because of what the Chinese Communist Party did to us. But I think we can also celebrate, and we should celebrate and highlight the amazing trajectory of this economy. I mean, this economy is vaulting higher right now. And I want to make the case to the American people that the way to continue and accelerate that economic revival is to rehire Donald Trump as our national CEO. And conversely, electing Joe Biden, I believe, would crush this recovery with the biggest tax hike in American history, $4 trillion, twice as big as anything that even Hillary Clinton proposed. And it would also represent, a Biden presidency would represent a retreat backwards to economic submission to China. I think if we continue to highlight over these closing days that decision point, that fulcrum decision point for the American people, I believe they're going to vote in favor of their own economic self-interest and the country's.
Steve, your Twitter bio notes your Hispanic heritage, and it's very possible that this race could come down to Hispanics in Florida, right? Like if you lose Florida, you've probably lost. You've made some real gains there.
Yeah, no, listen, we're doing great among Hispanics right now. We're going to keep working, though. We're not going to get complacent. The president shocked the world in 2016. He got 29% of the Hispanic vote, according to CNN. That was about twice as high as we were polling at the time. That was enough to shock the world. Now we are polling regularly in the 40s on a national level. Investors Business Daily new poll this week showed us at 42%. I think we're actually doing a bit better than that. I think there's naturally some reluctance of Hispanics to tell a stranger, a pollster, that they support the president. But nonetheless, anything in the 40s is really massive for our side because it likely secures Arizona and Florida as wins for the president. And if that is the case, that then puts enormous pressure on Joe Biden to effectively run the table in the Midwest. So we're working really hard to win the Hispanic vote, to earn their votes. I think we've been helped by the Democratic Party unwittingly because as they lurched leftward, they've left a lot of Latinos behind essentially as political orphans. We are conservative people, culturally, religiously, politically, and the Democratic Party of 2020 just doesn't have a home for a whole lot of Latinos.
Steve, we're about to get the hook here. I have to ask you about the Lincoln Project ads. So these are those ads made by former Republican consultants, and they're very designed. A lot of them are designed specifically to troll your campaign, to control the president. Like they buy a lot of time specifically in DC. When you're a campaign HQ, when you're on the campaign payroll, what's it like to watch those Lincoln Project ads when you know it's personal?
Sure. No, we obviously realize that they're coming at us. I think they're wasting a whole lot of donor money, by the way. I mean, the fact that they're buying ads in D.C., which is not remotely a battleground state, tells me that they're just really abusing their donors. And I think that's too bad. Look, I will say this. I'll say one nice thing about them. They're crafty with their ads, okay? They are artistically well done. I will give them that one compliment. But look, that's the only compliment I'm going to give them. This is a grift. I mean, it really is. These are a lot of people who are not conservatives, who were feigning their conservatism previously. And these are a lot of people who are operating on emotion purely, because if you actually are a conservative, I can understand if you don't like the president's style. I can understand if he's too brash, too rough for you. I get that. But to say that you oppose his policies and to say that you all of a sudden want a Democratic Senate, for example, as the Lincoln Project is now saying, tells me that you were never a conservative, you were never a Republican, and these people should largely be ignored. When we win, I think they will quickly be dismissed by their new liberal friends.
And Steve, as we say goodbye here, you're way down in money, but an advantage your campaign has is the family. A lot of the Trump family members are on the road, like doing their own events. They're their own draws. How much of a difference do you think it makes in these closing hours?
Oh, listen, I think it's very big. You know, how vigorously we're campaigning, and you're right, the Trump family is certainly a huge asset. They're really persuasive, likable people, and they're out there on the road. They are hustling as much as their father is. And you're right. By the way, I don't apologize for us being down in money. We are facing incredibly powerful interests. We're facing off against big tech, the corporate media, oligarchs like Mike Bloomberg spending $100 million in one state. Our movement is a movement of Donald Trump and the deplorables against powerful interests, and I'm not surprised that they've outraised us recently.
Steve, one fun thing we always like to finish with our newsmakers: when you're back home in Chicago on the weekends, you've got 3 daughters, a son, and you do a lot of driving.
We do. So my son loves football. He's super into the sport. And unfortunately, the state of Illinois, because of what I view as a terrible governor, Governor Pritzker, there's no youth sports going on right now. It's completely banned in our lockdown state. So we have to cross the border, as it were. We drive to Indiana to play football. My wife is wonderful, takes him far away to practice. I'm home on the weekend then to take him to the games. A lot of Chicagoans have to do this. I think it's really sad what's going on in Illinois, but we were not going to let our son miss a football season. So it's a pain in the neck, quite honestly, but it's worth it.
Steve Cortes, look forward to seeing you on the road, and thank you for joining Axios.
Thank you, Mike.
I'd like to thank the Bank of America for making these conversations possible. And now here's a quick video from the Bank of America.
The racial and economic disparities that have long existed in this country have only been widened by the coronavirus and amplified by the most recent acts of injustice. People around the world are coming together with greater urgency to demand action. At Bank of America, we know we all have a role to play to overcome the very real consequences of systemic racism and inequity. This includes individuals, governments, nonprofits, and the private sector. Racial equality and economic opportunity are deeply connected. That's why Bank of America has committed $1 billion over 4 years to address critical gaps in affordable housing, access to healthcare, employment and job skills, and the resources small businesses need to succeed. We can do more, and we need to do more now to further advance racial equality and economic opportunity for all.
Thanks for that message from our partners at Bank of America. I'm Margaret Talev, the White House and politics editor at Axios, and our next guest is Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, joining us from Wilmington. Hello, Senator Coons.
Hey, Margaret, great to be on with you.
Thanks. Well, Senator, we only have around 10 minutes and probably about as many questions. So if you're game, let's get going. You're a friend and campaign surrogate for Vice President Biden. You're also on the Judiciary Committee considering Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination, and the election's just a couple weeks away. Where do you see the race at this moment? And are you concerned that President Trump could still win even after the dueling town halls and some of the other events of this week?
Of course, Donald Trump could still win. And I'd like to encourage folks watching to ignore national polls. National polls are not relevant. The Electoral College means that a handful of critical swing states are likely to decide this election. We're just 18 days away from the presidential election. Millions of people have already voted early. And I think the town halls that were last night perfectly framed the difference in this campaign. Joe Biden was comfortable, relaxed, laid out clear plans for moving us forward as a nation, responding to the pandemic, dealing with the recession, bringing our country together, addressing long unresolved racial inequality issues, and strengthening and restoring our place in the world. President Trump last night on the stage in Miami was edgy, anxious, combative, aggressive. It might have made for compelling TV, but I found it exhausting to watch. And he did not have clear answers to some of the most pressing questions I get from Delawareans every day, which is how do we come up with a strong national plan to combat this pandemic and to regrow our economy in a way that'll get us out of this mess that Donald Trump has, frankly, largely gotten us into.
Senator, one of your Republican colleagues, Ben Sasse, pretty much unloaded to supporters in some audio that was leaked this week on a lot of things he finds unpleasant about the president. Did that surprise you? And have you ever heard him or other Senate Republicans speak that candidly in private?
I enjoy a number of friendships with my Republican colleagues who've privately been quite sharp about the ways in which President Trump's unconventional, even vulgar, and unmanaged and unmanageable behavior has put our nation at risk and has made him difficult to negotiate with. Just take a look at the attempts at negotiations around a COVID relief package. President Trump has swung wildly back and forth between announcing that he's shutting down all negotiations to less than 2 days later demanding that Republicans go big or go home. Mitch McConnell, the Republican majority leader, is likely to try and put on the floor this coming week a relief package that is a few $100 billion. And President Trump, I'll predict right now, probably within the same day, will attack Mitch for not having a bold enough or big enough plan and then announce that he's canceling all negotiations. This is enormously frustrating to Republican senators who find trying to have some common ground with President Trump very, very difficult. And those who care about whether or not the president is an appropriate moral role model for their children have long privately said he's just not an appealing national figure. His private life and his conduct, his language, his bullying have made it very difficult for all of us, I think, to endure these last few years. He also does not represent us well on the world stage. He has not just sharp elbows, he has frayed and distanced most of our critical alliances.
And I want to highlight one thing that you just said. You're predicting, again, no stimulus deal before the election. You are among a list of names that are mentioned for Secretary of State if Joe Biden is elected. Do you want to be Secretary of State? And do you believe that Vice President Biden's emphasis on building diversity through the cabinet could work against you?
Well, Margaret, I serve on the Foreign Relations Committee. I have for a decade. And I'm looking forward to helping advance the priorities, the agenda of a Biden-Harris administration, particularly with regards to our relations around the world. President Trump has taken an approach to global leadership that has combined coddling dictators and ignoring our longstanding central commitments to human rights and democracy with weakening and fraying our critical alliances around the world. I know that former Vice President Biden is deeply grounded in foreign policy, understands where he wants to take our nation and how to strengthen our place in the world. And right around him, he has a circle of senior, seasoned advisors, any one of whom would fill that role very well. So I look forward to finding the best way that I can be part of what I hope will be a critical moment for rebuilding American leadership, reimagining America's role on the world stage.
If he offered you that job, though, of Secretary of State, you would take that, right?
I'd be honored to serve in whatever role I could do the best, make the greatest difference for our country.
Okay. The Washington Post reported last night that U.S. intelligence agencies last year had warned the White House that Rudy Giuliani was the target of an influence operation by Russian intelligence. How concerned are you about that? And are you concerned that the president himself could be being used by Russians again in this election?
Absolutely. And don't take my word for it. FBI Director Chris Wray, the former Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, have both repeatedly publicly testified to Congress that they expect Russian disinformation activities, Russian intelligence activities to try and interfere with this upcoming presidential election to, if anything, be stronger, more aggressive, more capable than they were in 2016, where they had a sustained and significant role. And I think Rudy Giuliani has been ferrying back and forth between Ukraine and the United States. He's been called out as a target of Russian intelligence efforts. And I was encouraged, pleased that the Department of Treasury recently imposed additional sanctions on a Ukrainian oligarch with whom Rudy Giuliani has been working closely, who they identified as an active Russian intelligence asset.
Can you confirm the details of the Washington Post report? Are you aware of those warnings from U.S. intelligence that you can corroborate?
I cannot corroborate anything other than a public source reporting. I'm well aware of that reporting, and it fits with a longstanding pattern of activities by those close around President Trump, who seem to be at times willfully blind to the role and the influence of Russian intelligence in our domestic political affairs.
Thanks. 2 minutes, and we're doing great on these questions, so I'm going to keep moving. Joe Biden previously said he didn't favor court packing, but he's been careful not to get totally pinned down, including in the town hall last night. Is that the right strategy? And do you know how he actually feels about court packing?
How he actually feels about the Senate is that Joe Biden, who served in the Senate for 36 years, very, very strongly hopes that Republicans, after the defeat of President Donald Trump, if that's what happens 18 days from now, will take a moment and step back from the brink of this constant, relentless partisan push to test the very boundaries of our system. As I said just yesterday in the Senate Judiciary Committee, this process that's being followed, this unprecedented and rushed process to jam Judge Amy Coney Barrett into the Supreme Court just in time to rule on the Affordable Care Act and potentially to rule on a contested election, tests the very limits of our ability and willingness to work together. I know that Joe hopes that there will still be a window for a bipartisan reconciliation and that stronger efforts won't be required. But he's not naive at all about the ways in which Majority Leader McConnell stymied and stopped much of President Obama's agenda. I won't be a part of letting the Republicans in the Senate stop President Biden, should he be elected, from making any progress at all. But I will start by trying relentlessly, tirelessly, to work across the aisle in the first few months of the coming year, and then we'll have to see.
Okay. Judge Barrett's hearings, of course, took place this week. I watched your questioning of her with great interest, and you've said you'll vote against her. But I just want to know, were you reassured by any of her answers or her mannerisms, and kind of what were your general impressions about her? It certainly seems like she is going to be confirmed. Is there anything that you actually think can happen to stop that?
And the only thing that could happen to stop that at this point would be a real change of heart on the part of a number of our Republican colleagues. And given their conduct this week, and given the prize for them that is within sight, overturning the Affordable Care Act, overturning Roe versus Wade, reshaping the law for a generation in a more conservative, pro-corporate direction, I'd be very surprised if they do. I did think that when I really pressed her hard on a recusal in the event there is a case that arises from this election, she seemed to take that very seriously. I was not accusing her or suggesting in any way that she had cut some private deal with President Trump. I want to be clear about that. As I said in questioning her, it's the conduct of President Trump that puts at issue the legitimacy of our upcoming election, whether he'll accept the outcome of the election if he loses. And it's his own statements that he was pushing her onto the court in order to have an ally to decide the election case, should there be one. That's what put recusal on the table. And I'm hopeful that she will keep her commitment, that she's nobody's pawn, and that she will weigh that appropriately. The reason I'm voting against her is because, having read closely a number of her landmark law review articles and opinions, I concluded that she's not just a follower of Justice Scalia. She's not just one of the most conservative judges currently serving on a circuit court. Her view towards reaching back and re-examining and overturning long-settled precedent in an incredibly broad array of areas is to the right of Scalia, closer to Justice Thomas, and puts at risk decades of settled law in a very wide range of areas, from labor rights and environmental protection to Native American rights to the rights of criminal defendants, and of course, privacy and healthcare.
Senator Coons, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us here today at Axios.
Great being with you. Thank you very much.
And thanks to Bank of America for making today's conversation possible. After another video from our sponsor, stay tuned for a Why It Matters segment with Mike Allen and me.
Thank you to Bank of America for making these conversations possible. And now welcome back to Margaret Taleb, who runs Axios White House and politics coverage. Margaret, this event is called The Road Ahead, and we kind of think we know the road for the next couple of weeks, right?
Well, Mike, we think we know it, which is a constant stream of in-person, almost daily campaigns from President Trump to try to turn the dynamic of this race around, but national polling that shows Joe Biden expanding his lead and the possibility for a real blowout and game changer on the part of Democrats. But I'll put an asterisk next to that. We think we know that, but we don't know that. And 2016 is a warning of just how little we know until election night itself.
The permanent asterisk. And Margaret, I was fascinated to hear Senator Coons' conversation about the Supreme Court hearing. Judge Amy Coney Barrett was a sudden, last-minute, transcendent figure in this race.
She was, and it looked for a minute like she could really blow up the dynamics of the election. Republicans were hoping to energize their base around the idea of solidifying this 6-3 permanent, long-term majority on the court. Democrats were hoping to engage their base over the drama of the potential of losing Roe versus Wade if she were confirmed. I'm not sure that that's what is happening after this week of hearings. Coronavirus and a couple of other issues, including President Trump getting the virus and just the drama of the last couple of weeks, have really overshadowed people's interest, I think, in the Supreme Court. And then the nominee herself ended up, regardless of what you think about her ideology, her politics, what role she may fill in decisions, and that's important, but just in terms of character and personality, she has come across as a very sort of calming, sympathetic, honorable figure, parent of 7 children, adopted children, special needs children, and has really used those hearings to try to convey the idea that she would be an independent voice, nobody's pawn, was her words, in terms of something as crucial as the election. It looks like this is just headed to a glide path for confirmation and may not actually be a rallying cry that both sides thought it could be for the final weeks of voting.
Margaret, my favorite quote from Judge Amy Coney Barrett was one of the senators was saying, "I hope you got some rest last night after the first day of questioning." And she said, "You're smiling. You know what I'm going to say?" She said, "I went and had a glass of wine last night." That was a very human moment.
A humanizing moment, and one we can all relate to, except for me, because I'm on this darn diet and no glasses of wine until election night for me.
Now, is it true that for the dueling town halls, you had a glass of rum?
I was hoping to cheat on the Whole30 with a glass of bourbon, but it never happened. I got so busy. It was 2:30 in the morning. I never had that glass. So maybe when we're done today.
And Margaret, quick as we go, I'll start the bidding. Something I'm watching is in Florida, the Hispanic vote. Somebody down there reminded me how complicated that is, that when you're turning out the Hispanic vote or polling the Hispanic vote, whether you're turning out or polling people of Puerto Rican origin or of Cuban origin, you're going to get absolutely opposite results. What's one thing that you would watch?
You're absolutely right in Florida. Nationally, and in some of those Midwestern battleground states, I'm really watching the white working class vote, particularly men, but women as well. That's President Trump's really only chance of changing the dynamics in this race. He has to maximize turnout. You see him working very hard to try to do that. Is that possible, or are the numbers there? We'll see.
All right, Taylor's giving us the wrap up thing, but I'm going to sneak in one last question. You can answer this with one word. Are we going to have election night, election week, or election month?
I think we're going to have election week that feels like a month.
You stuck your landing, Margaret Taleb. Thank you for your great coverage at Axios. Thank you to Bank of America for making these fascinating, consequential conversations possible. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to see you back next week, next Friday. We have another Axios News Shapers, America's Road Ahead. And in the meantime, I'll see you on Axios.com.